What's the worst case of helicopter parenting you've seen? While working at new student orientation in college, I was told a story from a previous year. The parents who attended orientation were housed separately from the students. One mom wanted to stay with her daughter and took the bed of another student. The mom told the student she can find somewhere else to sleep. The student, not knowing what to do, ended up sleeping in a chair in the common area of the dorm. In a different twist on this story, my mom helped me move into my college dorm. She put the sheets on my bed and then proceeded to fall asleep on it. I had to bring all of my stuff up a 3-story walk up by myself while she took a nap. I guess that's whatever the opposite of a helicopter parent is. Working summer orientation for my old community college, and we have new students register for classes towards the end of the session. Counselors are there to help with class selection. This one mom was literally hovering over her son telling him which classes to choose and completely ignoring the counselor's advice. When she had him stand up, she proceeded to sit down and she herself started registering her son for his classes. I tried to intervene, letting her know that we ask that the student register themselves and that he'll be doing online registration for the rest of his college career. I was told to FK off. Later I pulled him aside and told him to change his password and swap into a class more appropriate for his placement exams. It was this incident that triggered us to design a parent orientation to keep them away from their kids. Welcome to adulthood, lil bro. That was a great idea, to separate the parents and kids at this point. A mom came with her kid to whine about a deserved poor grade. The kid was a junior in college. Mom was not happy when I informed her I couldn't and wouldn't talk to parents. And by not happy I mean lost her crap and was escorted out by campus security. The student was mortified, of course, even came by to apologize, and I was basically like, let's both just pretend that never happened. MK, here's what you should work on for the next exam. Parents always freak out on the help desk staff when they're told they can't see their kids' grades. But I pay the bill. Sure, you may do that, but the government doesn't care about that and I don't want to lose my job. My son told me about this 5th grade overnight trip to nature center. Kid's mom went, was only parent, that wasn't a teacher, to go. Had a complete meltdown when she was told that her kid would be sleeping in cabin with other kids and not her. She was told this before trip as well. 4 teachers per cabin. Basically overnight school. He said she basically spent the entire night outside watching the cabin. Really creeped everyone out. Man, the rants she went on Facebook. At least her friends and family called her out on her nonsense. Imagine quite a few people got blocked that day. I'm in college, living off campus with my 20-year-old roommate. She has to be in contact with her mom every single day. If she doesn't answer within a few hours, her mom gets extremely anxious about where she is and what she's doing. Her mom has called me more than once to see where she is. Usually, I'm within 40 feet of my roommate and she's just doing homework or watching cable. It's ridiculous that she's being monitored like a hawk when she's an adult. Don't answer when she does ridiculous possessive crap like that. It just enables her behavior. Agnes, one kid I knew from elementary high school. The mom didn't have a job and somehow managed to be at his school every single day, watching over him. In elementary she was a volunteer teacher's aide every year, which meant she would help out in whatever class he was in. By middle school, she was the head of the PTA, and although not necessary she was at the campus almost every day. She would just wander around and eventually, the school stopped caring and she could do whatever she wants. She would randomly pop into one of his classes and just observe or come up to him to hang out with him at lunch. The kid was 24/7 stressed the heck out. His whole body always clenched up. His mom put immense pressure on him to do well in school, both academically and behavior wise. He had an extremely hard time making friends and eventually he was bullied to the point of randomly getting beat up. Made it to the first year of high school before he had to transfer to another school. It's her fault. All she wanted was for him to be smart and polite to teachers, and he never got to learn how to just be a guy and make friends. I would just love to dissect her thoughts and actually reason with her, but I know these sort of people will flip out if you talk about their parenting in any shape or forms. I hope the kid managed to step away from his mom and live his life without her control. This is my sister's experience, but she taught kindergarten for a while and she had a kid whose mother wouldn't let her play outside if it was below 70 degrees and told the school she was allergic to dairy, but then admitted she lied about that because she couldn't trust that the school wouldn't serve her spoiled milk, so she thought it would be easier to just say she was allergic. Also, the kid was coincidentally sick and had to stay home from school on every single field trip. That poor child, was eating at the local all-you-can-eat cheap pizza buffet during college with friends. Overhear a conversation between a son and his mother where she was upset he wanted to go to said college because it was promoting drug use by having Tylenol available to buy in the student store. Wait until you hear about an ex-girlfriend of mine. We met in elementary school and reconnected later in our 20s. She was very shy and timid, but sweet and intelligent. I thought I would give it a go. She was 24 and still lived with her parents. No big deal to me. I didn't move out on my own until a few months before we began dating. Little did I know that it wasn't really her choice to live there. Her mother was incredibly controlling and was the worst helicopter parent I've ever come across. Her mom would repeatedly say to us, "It's nice you guys are dating, but I think you're both too young to be doing it." Mind you, we were both 24. She also mentioned, on several occasions, I didn't begin dating until I was in my 30s. I don't think anyone should date until they're 30-35. Things like that. My girlfriend was really annoyed by her comments and constantly got into this weird teenage-like arguments with her. One time her mom said, "Oh, that's just your young hormones kicking in." That was weird. Anyway, my girlfriend had to text her mom before she left anywhere, and when she arrived, her mom used to Google map the time and distance between places. If she forgot to text her, she received an insane amount of phone calls or texts. Her mom made her get paper checks so her mom could keep track of her money and would not allow her to get direct deposit. She was also way over precautious about things. One time we went for a walk around dusk. She lived in a small town, population 2000-2. 500, and lived on the side of town that was well lit and hardly any sort of vehicle traffic. Her mother sent her dozens of texts within minutes of us leaving begging her to come home because you're both not wearing reflective clothing. And this is a bad idea because it's getting dark, and I'm trying to protect you. Walking in the dark is incredibly dangerous, this and that. As a side note, her mom also used to make little hits at me for my job at the time. She said I don't think it's a good career path. I worked at a bank as a relationship manager, managing bank accounts and opening investment accounts for higher net worth individuals, and was looking to get my MBA. I was actively studying for the GRE exam. My sons befriended the new kid in middle school, homeschooled through elementary school years, but parents wanted him to interact with kids. He's a good kid, smart, but guarded and sheepish, but he got along great with my sons. They want to have a sleepover. He gets dropped off and his mother hands me a list. Had to be 4 pages of his routine, dos and don'ts and everything. Adam is not to have anything to drink after the hour of 8 p.m. He needs to brush his teeth with a toothbrush we sent him with. He needs to be asleep by blah blah blah. I have 3 kids. I can keep a 12-year-old kid alive for 20 hours without a list. She would text me non-stop. I felt bad for the kid. I let him know, listen, if you bend a few of these rules, I'll never tell your mom if you won't, and he had this huge smile. I'm not sure what kind of people helicopter parents think they're creating, but it can't be a fun one, that's for sure. I can keep a 12-year-old kid alive for 20 hours. After that though, all bets are off. I used to work at a school. We had to separate parents of unrelated special needs children who would drop their kids off in class and then stand in the hallways watching through the window for literally the full school day, every day, for the entire school year. Before anyone asks, the principal was a spineless pantoist who sucked, which is why this was allowed to go on. The next year the school got a new principal and I'm told she put her foot down, but by then I didn't work there anymore. In college, a girl's mom stayed in her room with her the first week of our freshman year, went to classes with her, ate with her and attended our dorm meeting, introducing herself as Crystal's mommy. She finally went home, and Crystal had obviously never learned to do anything on her own. Her roommate dated a guy in my floor and would tell us about her daily, multiple calls home. She didn't know how to do laundry, so mommy paid roommate to do it for her. By midterm, Crystal was failing all her classes and had basically just given up going to classes, it was too hard. Again mummy shows up, stays 2 weeks, talks to her professors, then pulled her out of school. I'm curious what she's doing now. Hopefully she broke out on her own and gained some independence. Probably married a guy who will take care of her like her mother did. Of course the mother probably found the guy for her. If that is your boat, then by all means float down the river in it. My best friend's mom. They live 10 minutes away from me, and my friend is really bad with directions. He drove to my house and got lost, so it took him like 45 minutes. After like 30 minutes his mom calls me and is sobbing because he hadn't checked in with her. He's 26. My aunt never let my cousins have any kind of sugar or candy. She told them that it was poison and tasted nasty. One time while our grandma was babysitting them, they were 6. She let them have 1 Capri Sun each. They loved it, saying Grammy, sugar actually tastes good, and threw up shortly after because their stomachs could not handle it. My cousins are alcoholics now. That went from 0 to 100 way too quick, man. Dude came in to talk about his son's test scores. The son was in my 2nd year university course, and the dad was a prof in the subject I was teaching who thought I was hard on his son. We reviewed the midterm together. In the end I gave the kid back 1 mark, so he went from like a 73 to a 74%. Seriously cannot imagine what it was like for that kid going up. Went to youth group with 2 kids who had the worst helicopter mom. These kids had no muscle mass and were the least athletic kids ever because their parents wouldn't let them play sports. Their mom came to every youth meeting we had, usually just for the youth and the youth leaders. The older kid begged his mom to go on a mission trip with us, only to another part of the state, not even out of country. After we all kind of vouched for him and said he'd be taken care, she let him go. Happy story in the end. He ended up completely coming out of his shell because of that trip. He got super independent and his mom let up seeing that he could take care of himself. I do not believe that last sentence. I'm sure it has happened to someone at some point, but that's unbelievable. As in I was checking students into their dorm rooms. One mother came with her son, who looked to be about 25, and she would not let him get a single word in. She went on about it being his first year in college and that she was finally approving of him moving away from home and actually going to college. A big yikes we kept an eye on later. When he was assigned to a traditional room with a roommate, she flipped her crap, saying how she wanted him in an apartment so she could stay with him whenever she wanted. Can't do that anyway, and she would withdraw him from school if she didn't get her way. Thankfully, I was already dead inside from dealing with other residents, so I checked her son in and immediately gave him the number of my boss in case his mother gave any more problems while he was moving in. I later heard from another that she tried to prevent the roommate from entering their shared room, even though her son was desperately trying to get her to leave. The and student security had to escort her out of the building where she sat until her son was done moving in. The son was actually a really cool dude once his mother was out of his hair, and a really involved student. Happy to be on his own and living the college life, even if he was a bit older. His mom still managed to call our duty phones asking about him, but BC of federal laws we just hung up. One of my neighbor's kids was a good basketball player, but she just didn't have the height for the position she played at a DI school. Coaches recruiting her told her that she could play DI if she switched positions, but her mother, who was a coach, would tell these coaches that her daughter wouldn't change positions, and to basically take it or leave it. Well, pretty much everyone chose to not extend scholarship offers at the DI level because of it. She ended up getting a really good scholarship to a DI school that had the academic program she wanted. They even had a 6-year program that combined undergrad and the post-undergraduate school she would have had to go to. So the process would have basically been seamless to become a licensed professional in her field. However, her mother was so controlling over her recruiting that she told her daughter she couldn't go there because the coach didn't send her a bunch of cards and whatnot. Basically things schools send to recruits to try to convince them to commit. It's mostly flattery, so she wouldn't allow her kid to commit there. Instead, she made her kid commit to this tiny DIE school in the middle of nowhere, literally nowhere, extremely small and rural, that didn't even have the academic program her kid wanted. Her reasoning was that her kid would get a good Christian education, but how good is any education if it doesn't even have what you want to study? Eventually, the kid, with help from her father, quit playing basketball and transferred to a large state school because she hated the small Christian school so much, and she could finally study what she wanted to study. Her mom was so controlling that she ended up giving up on the sport she loved. This all would have been avoided if she had just gone to the high school, but no. Her mom took way too much control and ended up ruining her kid's college athletic career. At some point it crosses over from helicopter parenting to abuse. I was 11-13 at the time. I had a friend on the swim team that was also around that age. His parents were the most controlling people I had ever seen. His mother looked like the head of a Catholic girls' school that punishes students for singing. We all used to play Nintendo DS games during meets. He just watched over our shoulders because if he touched a gaming console he would be punished. His parents always made him wear the same clothes every day. Tan khakis, white shirt, dark blue sweater vest. I once got him a t-shirt for his birthday. He gave it back saying that he wasn't allowed to wear it. He was homeschooled. Pretty sure his family spoke ecclesiastical Latin at home. Frickin' weird. Parents of Reddit, what mistake did you make raising your child that you can see manifest in them as an adult? My older boy is 12 and I caught him yelling at his younger sibling using the exact same tone and mannerisms I use when I'm angry. He needs to learn how to let go of anger, and I don't know how to teach him that because I don't know myself. They have professionals for that. No, seriously. Just like we don't expect people to set broken bones and instead tell them to go to the doctor, it's completely reasonable to go talk to a therapist about stuff like severe anger issues. I didn't let her fail enough. She's a very anxious adult. She was a super anxious child, and I felt terrible anytime something went really wrong for her. So I tried to teach her strategies to avoid having things go wrong. Now as an adult, there are times when no amount of strategy, backup plan, double checking etc will prevent something from going wrong. And she just goes to pieces very much the way she did when she was 3. Not exactly the same way, because she's slowly and painfully learning that failure is not the end of the world, and that you can pick yourself up, dust yourself off and start over. But I have a feeling that lesson would be easier and less painful to learn at 3 than in your 20s. Such an important lesson. I'm an anxious person too and eventually learned this one firsthand over and over in my early 20s. It might be part of just growing up. My kid isn't an adult yet, but he is a teenager. When he was young, we lived with my mom and then later, with my grandma. I was working full time and taking online classes from our local college. I tried to wait until he was asleep to do my schoolwork, but sometimes I had too much and had to start after dinner. He would be absolutely fine, just playing near me while I studied or did homework, and I would always answer him or give him a cuddle when he needed it. However, my mom and grandma couldn't handle this apparent lack of attention and would take him in the other room and dote on him. That sounds nice, and I think they had good intentions, but the result was that it took me years after finally moving out on my own to teach him to play on his own again without constant attention. At least you tried, and recognize it as a problem. My cousin's kids expect to be entertained or they'll start having screaming fits and their parents and grandparents, my aunt and uncle, dote on them. They're 10 and 7. I built my kids' PCs, upgraded them, cleaned the dust, set up their Xboxes and PlayStation, fixed the bikes and did everything that I could do for them. I should have showed them how to do it instead, taught them, not left them floundering at college when their crap inevitably breaks down and they cannot fix it. Not their fault, it's on me. Don't be a quitter, is what we said to our first child. He joined soccer, got bored, but we made him finish the season. He joined basketball, didn't like it, but we fought with him every week to go because we are good parents and didn't want to raise a quitter. He joined band, etc. After a few years he refused to join anything because we'd make him go, so he just didn't do any extra activity. We figured it out for our other 2 kids. They couldn't just quit, but had to think it through and try one more game or practice. Turns out they quit very few things, but never regretted it. Today our kids are adults and our oldest refuses to listen to our suggestions, often to his detriment, while the others will listen but do what they wanted to do but at least take our advice under consideration. My mom called me the experimental child because of this. My 2 younger siblings have better life skills than I do. We're in our 30s and 20s. Not encouraging him enough to put himself out there and make friends. In high school I had friends but was somewhat antisocial, and my mom would force me out of the house. I hated it at the time, but it probably ended up being for the best. Without a doubt, I did not let them fail enough. There are so many lessons to learn from falling and having to pick yourself up, from having to suffer the consequences and celebrate the victories of your decisions. I am watching my son struggle as a man, while watching him do exactly the same thing with his daughter. He never ever lets her fail, because he never wants to see her hurt. I totally get it. I should have let them fail. Reading. My daughter's is almost 8 and she is way behind on reading in school. She's in the slow reader group, and every time there is homework where she has to read anything with any degree of difficulty she completely shuts down and is almost impossible to deal with. Take the time and read a book or two to your kids as much as possible. My son was always slow to complete tasks, eating dinner, chores, etc. So I would put on a timer. Now he goes crazy whenever there is a timer and totally shuts down. Like if he plays a game and a timer comes on he just stops playing. Totally gave him an anxiety problem. Lucky for me he is still young so I am trying to fix it. Still feel junky about it though. My wife's little brother cannot be away from a phone or iPad for more than 5 minutes without going into withdrawal. I'm not talking about winning. I mean full on shaking and not knowing what to do. His boredom goes from captivated to anxiety unless he's killing brain cells watching the stupidest let's play on the internet. His mom would put Netflix on for him while they went on trips. The grocery store is a solid 20 minutes from their house. Everything is 20 minutes from their house. So at home or in the car he had a screen in his face from the time he was able to hold a tablet. He never charges his own tablet so he'll just go up to anyone in the house, grab their phone and start watching stuff, without asking. It's become a real problem because now they can't get him to do anything else. This is actually a mistake that my parents made that I refuse to pass on to my kids. They never apologized to me, not even once, and sometimes it was obvious that they were dead but wrong. When I screw something up for my kids, I make sure I sit them down and say, I'm sorry I screwed that up. Do you know what I get for it? Respect. My kids always tell me that they forgive me, and that it is okay. I try my best not to frick things up for them, but when I do, I feel that they deserve a heartfelt apology. I am not a parent, but I watch my brother raise his 3 sons and I think the biggest mistake he makes is forcing all 3 to do the exact same thing. If one plays baseball, they all play baseball. If one quits karate, they all quit karate. It drives me insane because he has one son, my favorite, who is sensitive and intelligent, but whose interests are always eclipsed by those of his brothers. He wants to learn French and take dance classes, but his brothers want to play football and pressure him until he says he does too. I can see that he is miserable and I try to get my brother to let him explore different activities, but he ignores me. The funny thing is that this is exactly how my dad raised us boys. I see a lot of myself in my nephew and it frustrates me to know that he is going through the exact same thing I went through. This is why aunts and uncles are so important. They can sympathize in ways parents are too clouded to see. This is an easy one. I tried too hard to shield my children from heartache and rough times because I grew up in a neglecting and abusive home. Bad things happen. Life can be unfair. Heartbreak can't be avoided and sometimes we fail. It hurts. Dang it, I know, but do not shield your children too much. They need to work on healthy coping skills. They need to learn how to handle heartache and failure and people being total shoots, and they need to know how to cope when they are the ones being total shoots to someone. Pain, tears, railing against fate. It all needs to happen. My sons, as adults, were easily rocked by bad times and had to learn how to cope better because I'd sheltered them too much from pain that life to offer. Yeah, kiddo, I know falling on your face hurts. It's supposed to hurt, but what can you do to prevent yourself from falling down that hole in the sidewalk again? Take another route. Made him extremely nervous about getting yelled at when speaking to us. So now he has a major fear of confrontation. My friend's kid is 4. She was their first child and from day one was princess name. The mother is real girly but is also very grounded, so combine that with a baby girl and the grounded part of her went out the window. Everything was pink, pretty, and princess. Now that she is 4, and has a baby brother. Already her parents are seeing the error of their ways. She is demanding, a ham, a diva, and gets very bitchy if you don't pay her 100% attention. I wonder what this will be like when she is in her teens. Never had much money when mine were growing up, and what money I did have I was irresponsible with. But I didn't want my sons to worry, so they never knew when I was poor, and I bought them about what they wanted. I wish now I had been more open and said I can't afford it, because now my 19-year-old has the same bad habits that I do. No idea what stuff costs, overdraft fees because he doesn't pay attention, impulse buying. I told him this week that somehow we were going to learn budgeting together this year, hoping Dave Ramsey has a starter course or a book. My biggest mistake was not taking better care of myself. I have been a Sam for 20 years, and I dedicated my life to my kids. I always put them first, and as a result, they see me as a second-class citizen. Yes, I spoiled them, another regret, and I should have demanded more respect. I also wish I had given them more opportunities to learn about gratitude. They are still young, teens, one who just turned 20. I know they love me, but they are spoiled and selfish. I raised a niece and a nephew, and by far the biggest mistake I made was spending too much time reaching for the stern solution, swat on the butt, when the firm solution, kid, come here, would have served them better over a lifetime. The net effect for them as adults is an inability to take anyone but the most serious and threatening authority figure seriously. My advice to current or soon-to-be parents would be to appreciate that if it takes 3 come here moments to avoid using physical punishment, it's likely going to be worth it for the kid in the long run. There's value in making them do things. The most important skill you have as an adult is the ability to suck it up, but how you make them do things matters a lot. On balance, they both grew up to be genuinely good human beings. Every now and then, though, they'll be telling me about something from work, and I'll cringe a bit because I know what the source of the problem is. The boy, especially, had a stretch in his late teens where he really gave too much credibility to adults with an authoritarian streak and not enough to those who wielded soft power. It took him a few years to figure out that the soft power person who could cut off your paycheck was just as dangerous. Lousy work ethic. They are all had ADHD and various other special needs, so when they were growing up they had chores, but there didn't seem to be any pressure to do them on time. You did them when mom absolutely lost her crap, and not until, so I felt like an egg. And now they are all adults and they still don't do their chores. They don't clean anything. Their rooms are a mess. They don't help with dinner. They don't do anything around the house, except leave a trail for me to clean up wherever they go. If I go completely bonkers and yell at them, then they will help. Once. Then they forget again. I am so tired to being the resident housekeeper, but the only option seems to be being a complete nag, which frankly I'm bloody tired of after 20 years. The most hilarious thing about this thread are all the grown adults commenting on how their parents messed them up. As a parent, I appreciate the parents who are speaking up about what they see. My parents were the hands-off type. They believe that we should explore our worlds by ourselves. We had no regulations. We did whatever we want. It was nice growing up. In fact, the kids in our neighborhood were jealous. Their parents, however, hated it. They thought we were corrupting their kids, and they were probably right. As an adult, I have absolutely no discipline when it comes to doing work during my free time. I would miss every deadline and forget about any responsibility. It's frustrating. There were times when I told myself, it's time to change, but I would fall back in my indolence way in about a week or two. I have no concept of cleanliness. I have a hard time keeping my apartment clean. I would try, but it would revert back to its former condition in a day or two. The lack of my parents' affection drove me to be needy. I am still struggling with relationships. As of now, all of my relationships had ended horribly. I pee away some very good women. I'm 17, and my parents are like this. They're lovely people, and this method has been wonderful for teaching me some things, but I also have problems with self-discipline and neediness. I'm worried I'll never be able to break the cycle. I grew up super anxious. tense and often got depressed, and I have always suspected it was tied to an innate fear of nothing in particular. I'm still that way at 56 years old. Most of the people on my mother's side of the family are that way. They often express fret and worry. They are quick to freak out over things that most people think are minor. When I raised my daughters, if anything went wrong or there was a risk of a problem occurring, I made a point to tell my girls that we could handle whatever happens. I told them that if you're paying attention and learning from your experiences, you could deal with almost anything. My girls are now 23 and 19 and both appear to have avoided the bugaboo that has made it very hard for me to relax and enjoy life. They both seem happy and at ease. I'm terribly proud of them and they're my favorite people to be with, partly because they both have a positive outlook. You should be proud of you. You helped break the cycle for them. Well done. I made sure they were well provided for, and I may have over provided for the sake of them not having to be without. Now, we have an entitled young adult that takes no responsibility for her actions and won't move out. BC, it's too hard out there. Make it harder at home. I remember growing up, my mom used to talk a lot about how wiggly babies are when you're changing them. How it only takes a second and they'll just flop right off the table if you're not careful. My mom also used to know a strange amount of information about the composition of the skull of an infant. How it's actually several small plates, and relatively soft, and how the plates would slowly grow together and fuse into a solid piece as the child grew. She'd start rambling about it at the weirdest times, usually after I'd done something unmistakably dumb. When I was in my late teens I shaved my head, and the hairstylist gasped at the massive dent in the back of my head. That was my first clue that not all skulls were shaped the same as mine. There is no such thing as a perfect parent. There are no perfect people. Every parent will screw up their child in some way. So before becoming a parent, think about the ramifications of what that means. You will screw up a child adult in small ways, large ways, or both, and you will bring a human into existence without their consent. You will raise them and hopefully they are self-sufficient, mostly happy, and will manage a healthy relationship with you and with others, but that may not come to pass. Even if all of these come to pass, you will make mistakes of varying degrees that will imprint on your kid forever. It makes parenthood sound terrifying, but you know what? It should be. Maybe they won't be a drug addict, but maybe they will. Perhaps they will seem well adjusted, but maybe they will be hiding cuts under their clothing or flinch every time someone raises their voice. You will make them cry. You will give them personality quirks or aversions. You will emotionally hurt them, often, even if it's developmentally necessary. You will question your methods by basing them on your own experiences. You will alter your methods based on popular social opinion. Even if you have a great relationship with your kid, 25 plus years down the road your successful, well-mannered adult offspring might be sitting in therapy, working around the one or many times you let them down. Maybe it was the one time you were high-strung from an event in your day, and when your kid needed 5 minutes of your time to tell you something important you yelled at them and sent them to their room. Maybe you thought it was about something silly, but it could have been about someone hurting them behind closed doors. In that moment they learned they couldn't go to you. It was hard enough to go to you, but now they were shut down, and it was the push that will sever their one connection to stopping the abuse that was happening to them. You will have forgotten that moment, but they never will. Being a parent is exhausting in the moments you don't remember, when you were your least supportive or thoughtful, could be moments your kid carries forever. That's scary, but everything isn't black and terrible either. Whatever mistake was made or will be made, when your child needs an ear or an apology, give it. Give both these things freely. At the end of the day, that's often the only thing a kid adult needs more than a parent trying to be perfect. It doesn't matter how many years have passed, but both are things without expiration dates and are always welcome, even when not acknowledged. Admit to being human. Apologize for the times you could not be your best, but establish a means for your kid to come to you for support when they need it. That's the best thing a parent can do for a kid's emotional health. You don't have to be superhuman, just be human and willing to apologize and listen. What's the one weird thing your parents wouldn't let you do? We weren't allowed to watch MTV. My mom blocked MTV on the living room TV, but she didn't block it on their bedroom TV. So my sisters and I would get home from school, watch MTV in my parents' bedroom, memorize the channel it was on when we turned it on, memorize the previous channel it was on, and then switch it back to those two channels when we saw her coming up the driveway. We also had to be sure to pull the blinds and draw the curtains if it was winter, or else she could see the TV on as she drove up the driveway when it was dark at 5 p.m. One time she came home and felt the TV and it was warm. The jig was up. That extra effort to make sure mom pressing the recall button didn't out you. Nice work. My mom used to not let me go to the bathroom until I finished my homework. What the frick? Have a Ken doll. No idea why my dad was so against it, but he was. So instead I would take one sacrificial Barbie, cut off all her hair and make her the boy of the group who'd do hot stuff with all the Barbies. I had a commune of lesbians. My mom made me turn off the TV or radio when McDonald's commercials came on the air. In the 80s, they had the Do You Believe in Magic theme song at the time, and my mom was afraid the commercial would influence me to actually practice magic and summon demons. My dad would cross out the word lucky on anything we owned. Sometimes wrote blessed below it for good measure. The word luck implied taking away credit from God. Ironically, he apparently had no problem with magic because I grew up with blessed charms. Go out during a thunderstorm. Now this isn't very weird, but the weird bit is that my sister was allowed outside but I wasn't. My mom has this weird idea that guys are somehow more susceptible to getting struck by lightning than females. Guys are statistically more likely to be struck by lightning, but that's because guys are more likely to work out of doors. My parents said there would be no video games in the house ever. After my grandfather heard this, he got me a PS2 for Christmas. My mother said I couldn't wear makeup, shave my legs, or get a bra until I was 16 because her parents didn't let her do any of that when she was younger. The weirdest part about it is that I have an older sister and none of these restrictions were placed on her. My parents were adamant growing up we could not watch The Simpsons because of how Bart treated his father with disrespect. However, they seemed to have no issues with us watching South Park. That seems awfully one-sided considered Homer choking Bart is iconic of The Simpsons. My mom would never let me try the peanut butter that had jelly mixed into it. I would always ask if she could grab some at the store and she would say no. I eventually got to try it and it was the most foul thing ever. She laughed when I told her. It wasn't allowed in our house either. Maybe I'll get some tomorrow and give it a try. My dad used to come yell at me for playing the bass strings on my guitar because he could hear them in the other room no matter how quiet I was being. I was only allowed to play the D, G and E strings when he was around basically. You should have just learned the banjo instead. If I started watching a scary movie, I was not allowed to stop watching it if I thought it was too scary. I don't know what kind of lesson they were trying to teach me, but it didn't matter because I never came across a movie that was too scary anyway. I remember watching things like Predator with my dad after midnight when I was 6 years old, and those are still some of the best memories I have with him. Mom was P though. Actually, this used to be a common one. My husband's mom did the same. Scary movies used to have some form of closure at the end and it was supposed to stop nightmares because the monster bad guy was dead by the end of the movie. He says it worked a treat for him and his siblings. Watch Cat Dog. My mom was really weirded out by it. She couldn't figure out how they'd eliminate bodily waste. There was one episode where Cat had to find something that dog swallowed. This was done by crawling into the dog's mouth and crawling to the stomach. However, the cat took a wrong turn and came out of his own mouth. That part messed with my head. I wasn't allowed to shave my arms in middle school because my dad and grandma were under the impression my already bushy arm hair would grow back in twice as thick because of an old wives' tale. I got made fun of a lot for it, so my dad let me bleach it instead. The boys all noticed and would just make fun of me for bleaching it, so I started shaving anyway. My dad noticed eventually but decided to let it go. 12 years later and I don't have to worry about having man arms. No regrets. I wasn't allowed to shave my legs when all my friends started shaving. According to my mom, I was too young to shave, so I got teased relentlessly for years for having hairy legs. We weren't allowed to walk on the carpet after my mom vacuumed because she liked the lines. We also couldn't use the bathroom for about an hour after she cleaned it because, well, I guess it was clean. Yes, my mom has some issues. Unrelated to the question, but when we were kids and my mom made us vacuum, we would turn on the vacuum and just let it sit there while we used rollerblades to make lines in the carpet to make it look like we vacuumed. Probably would have taken less time to just vacuum the floor. My parents didn't let me wear black shirts to sleep because they said I would get nightmares. They would never let me go to any friends' houses, like ever, and God forbid if I asked why not, because I said so. So it got to the point where I would sneak out, like thrice weekly. I became the bad child because they just wouldn't permit me to have fun. It's super common for kids living with restrictive parent to be totally crapheads about it when they get to their teens. I was kind of the same way. It was the reason I first tried the ganja when I was 12. I knew drugs were supposed to be bad and my parents obviously didn't want me doing them, so I did them a lot. This is going to sound weird, but my parents wouldn't let me cut my nails in the nighttime as they were scared I'd cut something unnoticed and bleed to death while sleeping. I was never allowed to watch The Simpsons or Power Rangers. My parents enforced a lot of rules that I didn't understand until I was older, but I still have no idea why those two shows were off limits. Even now, when I'm visiting them and I turn the TV onto The Simpsons, my dad will inevitably groan, "Ugh, you're not watching The Simpsons, are you?" I wasn't allowed to watch the Rugrats. Freaking Angelica. Go to concerts. Ever. At all. This may have something to do with how much fun they had at concerts in the 70s. Watch Ed, Edd and Eddy. I have no idea why. I would sit in the living room with dad and Family Guy would be on, but no Ed, Edd and Eddy. My mom made me avoid that show because she felt that stupid was a bad word. Apparently they said that a lot, but I wouldn't know for myself. As a teen, I came home with a badass patch I purchased at the local downtown hip store, and it was a skull with the number 13 on the forehead. My mom grabbed a pair of shears and cut the number out of the patch and gave it back to me, because the 13th letter of the alphabet is M, and M stands for herb. My sis and I just stared at her with giant WTF faces. Like, did we really just witness the crazy unfold? I had never even smoked pot in my life when she did that. But guess what I did shortly thereafter? Thanks for the idea, Mom. She also threw away this cool Dia de los Muertos skull I had because it was negative and she accused me of being obsessed with death. I don't have the heart to tell her that she has a skull inside of her head. It would destroy her. I don't have the heart to tell her that she has a skull inside of her head. It would destroy her. That made me laugh out loud. Sorry about the crazy you put up with. My mother would not allow me to interact with kids my age for fear they would corrupt me. My mom wouldn't let us cuss or anything like that, which I understand most parents do, but she would not let us say fart either. Don't understand why. Whistle. Apparently it attracts burglars. I've heard the whistling at night attracts burglars thing before from a Japanese person. I'm stupidly superstitious and don't whistle at night now, even though that doesn't make any sense. I couldn't play dungeon-based video games. I became instantly rebellious and learned how to make my own at age 12. I'm a software engineer as a result now. Thanks, Mom. My parents took my car when they found out I watched American Gangster 1 month before I turned 17. They now left the church, divorced, and both smoke pot. You should feel ashamed. This is precisely why they didn't want you watching R-rated movies. I wasn't allowed to watch David Copperfield make New York disappear. My mother was a Jehovah's Witness and the head elders believed that Copperfield sold his soul to the devil to get real magic powers. I just went to my grandpa's house and he let me watch whatever I wanted except Golden Girls because that Blanche was too trampy. Well, he wasn't wrong. She was the town bicycle. Then again, maybe he had a thing for her and it was too weird to watch with you. Watch the movie Tron, the original one. I still have no idea why. I got in lots of trouble when I stayed with my grandparents for a few days and had them rent Tron for me. Worth it. I loved that movie. My father wouldn't let me and my sister watch Mr. Rogers, Sesame Street, Electric Company, and Zoom were okay, but not Mr. Rogers. I wasn't allowed red meat until I was like 12 because my mum and dad worked in a slaughterhouse for a bit and were scared of meat-borne diseases. Dang, that means they stopped giving a crap about you at 12. I was almost a teenager and I couldn't paint my nails, wear clothes with words because they brought too much attention to my body. Answer the door, answer the phone, bring in the mail, open a window that didn't have a screen, lock doors, etc. Hard to pick one weird thing with my parents. My father drank and my mother took diet pills, yet we weren't allowed to watch Underdog because he takes a pill for his powers. My mother absolutely refused to let me make certain dishes during certain times of the year. I could only make scalloped potatoes, which I freaking love, on Easter and Christmas for example. Get vaccinated, or eat any foods that were genetically modified. My mom was a crazy conspiracy theorist. My TV was so restricted, anything from Barney to SpongeBob and Pokemon was not allowed even until I left for college. My parents would never let me stay home sick from school. I literally broke my arm and went to school for 3 days until I saw a doctor. I'd be throwing up my lungs and she'd say just wait till you get home. That's straight up child neglect. Canadian here was not allowed to lay bags of milk on their side because they would go bad. I wasn't allowed to listen to Vanilla Ice because it was too raunchy. I remember one time dancing like a fool at my best friend's house to her Vanilla Ice tape just because I wasn't supposed to be. Wear a studded punk rock belt. I kept asking why and my mom said it would make me look like a trashy person. She finally said if I could get it by my elderly, extremely conservative Christian grandmother, I could wear one. I promptly took my granny out shopping and was like, "Hey, this is neat, what do you think?" She said, "Wow, that looks sharp," and my mom lost that day. Wear any makeup or perfume. You are a good son. My mom wouldn't let me or my brother sign up to be organ donors when we got our driver's licenses. Her reasoning? You'll need your organs in your next life. My mother isn't religious at all. In fact, she's probably closer to a militant atheist, but she's still dead against us being organ donors. She's not one. She's certain she'll need her organs in her next life. It's very, very strange. Both my brother and I are now organ donors, despite my mother's protests. My parents wouldn't let my siblings and I watch any sitcoms. They were religious and believed that excessive laughter was sinful. They still sometimes ostracize me for laughing at something on my phone whenever I visit them. Peanut butter was not allowed to be stored outside of the fridge. Ever tried spreading cold peanut butter on a bread? So many torn sandwiches. I was not allowed to question my mom's knowledge of something. I was smart enough to know by around 5 years old that parents didn't always know the answer to everything or tell the truth. I remember getting snapped at for asking, "How do you know about something?" she was telling my brother and I. They made me break up with my best friend when they found out we played D&D. Legitimately my best bud, shattered my child self. What bizarre rule did your parents enforce that seemed normal, but when you grew up realized it was not normal at all? No saying number as long as someone asks kindly, you have to say yes. I wasn't allowed to sleep over at friends' houses until I was almost in middle school. Why? Because my mother was afraid that we would play Russian roulette. My parents are pretty much hoarders, so we would get in trouble for cleaning. My mom always blamed our house being messy on her just being too busy, so once in junior high I thought I would surprise her and have the whole kitchen clean when she got home. I cleared all the piles off the counters, threw away a bunch of decades-old magazines, and took out like 2 giant bags of trash. When she got home she was not pleased, but panicked, and promptly went digging outside in the trash can to bring the stuff back in. Only 3 sheets of toilet paper allowed per visit. This included if you went number 2. I swear my mum used to stand outside and listen, and she just knew when I used more and I would get yelled at and the door nearly broken down. This ran into my teens. Jesus H. Christ, depending on what I've been eating, 3 sheets is a preliminary damage report. Juice always had to be watered down to 50%. It wasn't a bad rule, saves calories and money, but it totally blew my mind when I found out that other families drink orange juice full strength. My mom never let us whistle. She said it would attract mice. I now know she was just making stuff up because whistling was annoying to her. Here in Japan, parents tell their kids whistling will attract snakes. 8:30 bedtime. My entire Damned life. Though, I knew as a teenager that making your high schooler go to bed when it was still light out half the time was wacko. Well into my 20s I'd come back to visit for the holidays and dad would get up to use the toilet at night, see the light on in my room from me being awake reading a book at 10 PM, and yell at me to go to sleep. I had to go to bed at 6:45 until I was 15. I graduated last year, and get to stay up all night if I want. No idea why. My dad would stomp the floor so we could hear how many stomps from the basement. This was to indicate which kid he needed to talk to, instead hollering us up. 2 stomps meant I had to come upstairs for something. 3 stomps my brother. 4 stomps my other brother. That is actually pretty genius. My dad used to make my sister and I rake leaves in our woods. Our fricking woods. Your father was interfering with the important nutrient cycling of that forest. Normal parents take a toy away until their child's behavior improves, then returns the toy as a reward for good behavior. My mother just took my stuff and never gave it back. She'd claimed that we could earn our toys back with extra chores and good grades, but she never followed through even though I was on a roll every single semester. I was in college when the closet organizer in our hallway closet had a critical failure, so I came home to help move stuff. I found an entire box of my confiscated books and toys. I crap you not. My mother picked up a Beanie Baby and looked at me sadly while she said, "I was waiting for you to earn this back. What were you going to surprise me with after I walked the stage and got my diploma?" This is a good incentive for a kid not to improve their behavior. Father-in-law forbade anyone from drinking a beverage during the first half of any meal. No water, no milk, no juice, nothing, no matter how thirsty you were. He took this very seriously and would berate both kids and adults at the table if they tried. Imho, this ruined the meal experience. The rest of the family tolerated this for some reason. I had to explain to my wife no one else ever did this and we would never use that rule at our own dinner table. We had to wake up whenever my parents got up, even if it was 4 AM. One of them would yell up the stairs for us to get up. Didn't realize I could get up at my own leisure until I got married and moved out. One day I got out of bed when my husband did and we were sitting in the living room watching TV when I exclaimed that I was still tired. He said, "So go back to bed then," and it was like those moments on a show when an actor just looks at the camera with a surprised expression. The sudden realization that I could wake up whenever I wanted was overwhelming. Also, now that I have a kid, I have no idea why they wouldn't let us sleep so they could have some free time. Like, dang, if my son is sleeping I'm taking in all the quiet and enjoying myself some free time. This drove me nuts as a kid. Dad was a farmer, so 5 AM starts were standard. He thought just because he was up every other bastard had to be as well. So dumb, because all my brother and I would do was fight for hours. If he had just let us sleep he would have had some peace and quiet. That the man was watching us, my sister and I as kids. Not Santa, literally the man. So say if we were playing up, they'd go, "You'd better stop that. He's watching," and we'd quit immediately for the impending dread this man would bring. How freaking creepy is that? Holy crap, we had this too. It was always the man upstairs or the man across the road. Threats of him coming over and yelling at us, taking us away when we were loud bratty were common. I remember one day becoming curious about him, the threat at that point proving to be empty, and started asking questions. Conveniently, he moved away shortly afterwards. I wasn't allowed in the basement. Turns out they were smoking weed down there. My parents smoked weed in the laundry. I just thought that's what laundry smelled like. I didn't realize not everybody's house was spotless. My siblings and I cleaned the whole house every week. Moved furniture to vacuum, dust, etc, and we had a housekeeper that would come for a full day to clean, dust and vacuum the stuff we did 2-3 days prior every week as well. We also had several old trees in our yard, would have to pick up any stick that fell daily. Occasionally the whole family would go through the yard on our hands and knees picking up any stick longer than 1 inch. Once when I was in high school my mom wouldn't let me go to practice after school because I needed to tighten every screw in the house because things were coming loose. I was not allowed to go anywhere alone until like 14. Seriously, not even allowed to walk to school with friends. I assumed everyone was that sheltered until I started high school and realized it was just me. Growing up I lived in the country and took the bus to school. My brother and I would stand at the end of the driveway waiting for the bus. on our own. A couple of neighbor kids, 4 years younger than me, always waited for the bus with their mom. She was still out there with them when they started high school. It was kind of weird. I wasn't allowed to have boys phone or come calling for me because my mom didn't want me to turn out to be some little hoe. Joke's on you, mom. My parents made me go to church 4 times a week where they constantly preached about purity and how not being pure would ruin you. I slept with a boy at 15, decided I was ruined, dropped out of high school my senior year and became a stripper. Thanks mom and dad. We weren't allowed peace signs growing up. My mom remembers some speech from when she was a kid about how communism would come under the sign of peace, so peace signs were banned in our house. Those troll figurines were banned too. That's cause the troll figurines are creepy. You eat everything you're served. So if they put a whole lot of food on our plate, and we had already eaten enough and were not hungry anymore, we would have to stay on the table until we were done. Regularly making dirty jokes since I was 12 with my own parents. It turns out nobody does that with their parents. My friends were all amazed my mom and I would crack jokes and make fun of each other. I was just as surprised that their moms had such big egos they couldn't take a joke. When I got home from school, my dad would always ask, how did you frick up today? I was a prissy, straight A student, so this was his attempt to keep my ego in check. I later learned normal parents asked, what did you learn today? I had no rules or chores growing up. I could eat as much candy or drink as much soda or eat as much junk food as I wanted. My mom would actually get angry if my dad had us do chores. She would say, you only get to be a kid once and then you're grown and you'll have to rely on yourself. I am a responsible, hard-working 24-year-old now, so I guess it's kinda bizarre that I had no rules at all. My mom has set prices that are a deal for produce, and we could never buy anything more expensive than that price. Grapes had to be less than $1.19 or lb. Corn had to be at least 6 for $1. It wasn't until I was well into adulthood that I realized I could buy whatever I dang well pleased no matter what the price. Interestingly, her deal prices haven't changed since I was a kid in the 80s. Your mom must be very hungry these days. We could only eat 2 cookies at a time, and no more than 4 in a day. I was living on my own for like a year abiding by this rule, until one day I was like, man, I really want 3 Oreos, not 2, and I did it. I had this rule too. Also realized I was still following it when I was like 17/18, and my mom noticed. She laughed at me. We had a lock on the fridge and were never allowed to help ourselves to anything. You had to ask. Usually the answer was no. I started buying junk food and hiding it in my closet. I think my father was completely clueless about growing teenage appetites and smoked, so his appetite was almost non-existent. I struggle with binge eating to this day. I still love a good gorge. It means freedom and a giant middle finger to that lock on the fridge. I've heard of kids who have had this problem and they usually end up fat as they get old due to the freedom of being allowed to eat whatever they want in their own homes. Had to go to church 4 times a week to set an example. Anytime I asked to go out with friends to do something that would have mixed genders or could be construed as a party, I was asked, would Jesus do something like that? Yes, he totally freaking would have. My mom wouldn't let us use water guns. We could only use these things called squirters, and if the neighborhood kids were having water fights, she would come out and test the strength of the sprays. If it was too strong, we had to go inside. In high school, I went to a pool party with super soakers and basically had an anxiety attack. I was so afraid someone would post photos. When people collected canned goods for food pantries, we could only give them creamed corn. I once was grounded for taking some green beans for the homeless shelter. I make it a point to find out what the pantry needs before donating now. It's never creamed corn. We could only mow the yard wearing a bathing suit. Finally own my own house and wear shorts and a shirt, and it's still not a great chore, but at least I'm clothed. We were not allowed to say these words. Shut up, fart, dumb, and stupid. My siblings and I are all adults now and my mother still gets angry when we say any of those things. She gets particularly upset when we ask the question, insert name, did you fart? I ask that question all the time now just to frick with her. My mom had this rule, but she also regularly called me a piece of crap and my dad a bastard, so I just kind of ignored it. Most of the time it wasn't a problem. Every Sunday we would dress up and go to Big Boy at around 10 AM. Every other family in town was also in fancy clothes and at Big Boy. Later I learned that all those other people were at church, which we did not participate in. So either we were pretending we were at church, or we worship Big Boy. All hail Big Boy, our Lord and Savior. My mom never let me eat any push pops, ring pops, etc. She said she did it because she didn't want perverts getting bad ideas. I always thought it was weird. After he discovered that I'd been watching P, my dad routinely checked my internet history, not the browser history, the DNS logs, which only he had access to. I was confronted multiple times in high school because I'd been looking at content that he didn't think was suitable. I wasn't allowed to get a smartphone until college because it would have been possible to browse the internet unmonitored. My dad is a very introverted guy, and he never liked to be in large crowds, so unless it was a school event, I was forbidden from going to any large crowded events, places like the mall, concerts, sporting events. I was told that this was for my own safety. I was never allowed to go anywhere New Year's Eve, even in the morning. My mother was convinced that there were drunks on the road at 10 AM. New Year's Day was fine, but not on the eve. I'm over 40 and she still complains if I go somewhere that I'm going to get hit by a drunk. My brothers and I were only allowed to drink 1 glass of orange juice during breakfast. If we got caught trying to drink it at any other point in the day, my dad would lose his crap. My mother knocked things in the floor all the time and never cleaned up. Always too lazy to get a job. She existed. Father worked all day and didn't feel like cleaning. And we went to school, so decided it wasn't our place. By the end there was trash piled up almost 4 inches everywhere. And while I knew it was, I didn't personally like it. I didn't know it was far abnormal. I just kept my own room clean and let that be the end of it. The bottom layers had turned to true dirt by the time we were cleaning it and moving out. Dogs had crap everywhere and it never got taken care of. On top of this, I was never allowed to see friends outside school until I could drive, and as such had many social issues until well after graduation. My very liberal mother did not allow us to watch The Simpsons. Never really understood why. Couldn't play video games unless it was the weekend. Seems normal at first, but then you realize that it just enforces bad habits. My brother and I would wait until the weekend, and then binge the entire weekend playing video games. And even if we didn't feel like it, and though it would be better to do something else, we always said, well, we better play anyway because we won't be able to after. Also, what were we supposed to do when the homework was done? It isn't like homework took up the entire day. I grew up with the same rule, but eventually I transitioned into binging every day of every week during high school, when they became a bit more lenient. Had to eat cheese strings the same way you might eat a banana, with the plastic still on the bottom half, just taking bites off the top. I just wanted to make a wacky weird thing. Your parents are monsters. My dad had several weird ones to this day I still don't understand. I wasn't allowed to read at the table while I was eating or drinking, even if I was completely by myself drinking coffee. If he walked in on me, he would berate me for having a toy at the table. No one in the family was allowed to drink at the counter in the kitchen. I have a habit of just draining a glass of water and pouring myself a second one. I didn't see the point of filling a glass, going to sit down, spend about a minute drinking, and then getting back up just to refill the glass. I tend to drain most drinks in a matter of seconds, so I got into the habit of just drinking at the counter. First time my dad saw me doing this, he lost it, yelling at me about how it wasn't normal and to sit down at the table while I drank. Reading books before bedtime was forbidden. Everyone in the house throughout the day has to be productive. Reading is for right before you go to bed. Finish all your chores before everyone else frick you. Your brother/sister is still cleaning. You're just being lazy by sitting down to read a book. He also had major issues with me just reading in general, even for class assignments. I actually had a full-on argument with him a couple of times about The Great Gatsby and Catcher in the Rye I was reading for my English lit class. He was trying to prevent me from reading them, but I shot back I had to because it counted towards my grade. The entire class also took a huge test on each book, so not reading wasn't an option. Yeah, he was a bizarre person. Suffice to say we don't talk anymore. I was raised in a funny Christian household. Though our media options were limited to VeggieTales and the like, we always had to ask before watching any video. Usually, the answer was a simple yes or no. But this one time, I was around 14 and asked my dad if I could watch Winnie the Pooh. It was for my little siblings, but I was bored. He told me, dead serious, that he needed to pray about it. Right there, he asked God for wisdom in deciding whether I should watch it or not. I stood there just trying to figure out if he was messing with me. He was not. After about a minute, he looks at me and says, I guess that would be okay. My parents left all the original protective plastic covers on anything they bought, like lampshades or plastic film on VCRs. The only verbalized rules in my house were safety rules. For example, no playing in the street, no going on the monkey bars if your sister is underneath, etc. For behavioral control, they used stories. A few examples. You shouldn't touch bleach because your colors will fade, and then daddy won't be able to see you, and he'll be sad wandering around saying where's my daughter? You shouldn't frown, because when kids used to have to perform on vaudeville stages, the ones who didn't smile didn't earn any money and then their families starved. You shouldn't try to scare people by shouting boo because daddy might jump and fall out the window, shattering all his vertebrae and paralyzing him for life. You shouldn't distract mommy while she's driving, because she might miss the exit and drive all the way to Canada by mistake, and since we don't have passports, they won't let us into Canada, and we will never find a bed. We lived in New Jersey, and so on. I'm laughing as I type these because they were a surprisingly effective teaching method. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.